Welcome to the locker room. I am Nancy. It is 3:03 in the afternoon. I'm so happy that you guys are here. Today we are going to talk about Dennis Rader. I don't know how many of you remember the story from the late 70s, early 80s. Well, nothing really happened since 79 up until I think it was 2005 when he was finally caught. So let me pull it up on the screen. The links to these are all in my description. It says Uncovered, Dennis Rader, Serial Unaliver Series. Know the victims. Dennis Rader, quick facts. Dennis Lynn Rader, 78 years old, BTK or BTK killer, BTK strangler, bind, torture, unalive. February 25th, 2025, 2005, I'm sorry. While on his way home to have lunch with his wife, who had no idea that her husband was a monster, known active state, Kansas. Possible active states, Oklahoma and Missouri. Date of confirmed red rooms, January 15th, 1974 to January 19th, 1991. So this is when he was being, they were saying it was him because, and I think it'll tell you how he got the name BTK. Rader is an American actual sadistic serial unaliver who was found guilty of red rumming 10 people in Wichita and Park City, Kansas. Rader worked at the Wichita-based office of the ADT Security Service, where he installed security alarms as part of his job. He typically targeted women as his victims, but he occasionally unalived or attempted to unalive men and children when they interfered with his fantasies. Who does that sound like? Works for ADT. Actually, she was an installer for a different security company, but okay. Rader is most known for tying himself up while wearing clothes he took from his victims. Not only would he wear the clothes of the victims, he would frequently wear a mask that resembled a woman's face. One mask was decorated to have eyelashes and red lipstick and worried eyebrows. Another mask had heavy eye and cheek and lip makeup and was worn with a long wig. Rader was married to Paula Dietz, and together they have two children, Carrie and Brian. After Rader's arrest, his wife was granted an emergency divorce. To this day, Carrie Rawson, BTK's daughter, is a fierce advocate for the victims and works closely with law enforcement to solve the cold cases connected to Rader. Criminal penalty. Rader pled guilty to 10 counts of first-degree red rum and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently carrying out his 175-year punishment of 10 consecutive life sentences at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in El Dorado, Kansas, a maximum security prison. That is the same prison that my husband was a security guard in. And he said there were times when he would have to sit. They have a guard 24/7 sitting outside his cell. And not for anybody else in the prison's safety, but for Rader's safety. He's now sitting in a wheelchair. Or if he does stand up, he's all hunched over in the back. So BTK's victims know their names. Regarding victimology, Dennis Rader's victims varied in range and background. He targeted women and young women, but also took the lives of men and children who were present in the victims' homes. Surviving BTK. A blog has one of the most in-depth recordings of who the BTK victims were beyond just the details of the assaults. Rader referred to his victims as PJs or projects. In his communication, particularly in letters and writings sent to the media, law enforcement, and even his victims' families, he would cut words out of magazines and books and tape them or paste them to paper, and then he would mail the paper to the law enforcement or the victims' families. This chilling and dehumanizing term provided insights to Rader's stability or disturbing mindset and reflects his detached and callous approach to his crimes. It also underlines his approach to how he saw his stalking, abducting, and unaliving as genius work that needed to be carefully planned. The Otero family, suffocated, strangled, and hanged on January 15th, 1974. I guess he got all of these people, all four of them. Rader's documented unalivings began in January of 1974 when he targeted his first project. I was only in the fifth grade. Can you believe this? I was in the fifth grade when I heard about this first time. It was on the news. Of course, back then we only had 3 channels, so you got to watch the news at 6 o'clock and at 10 o'clock. Well, we didn't because we were in bed. But you got to watch the 6 o'clock news every day. Okay. When he targeted his first project, the Otero family, who had been living in Wichita for less than 6 months. Originally, he had set his violent sights on Julie and the 11-year-old daughter, Josie. The Otero family was big. Parents Julie and Joseph had 5 children. On that fateful morning, the oldest children had gone to school, leaving the 2 youngest, 9-year-old Joey and 11-year-old Josie, at home with their parents. Rader suffocated and strangled the families with plastic bags. For the males, he roped for the females. Okay. Charlie Otero, the 15-year-old son who was out at school that day, came home that afternoon and found their dog, Lucky, outside. When we went through the back kitchen door, we walked into a nightmare. Charlie has described his father was outgoing and jovial, and his mother was very caring, loving Catholic woman. Catherine Bright, stabbed April 4, 1974. Only a few months after the Otero family's red rooms, Rader broke into a home of Catherine Bright and hid in the bedroom, waiting for her to come home. A few hours later, she arrived home, but it was with her brother, Kevin. Rader rushed out of the bedroom, saying he was a wanted criminal, waving a gun around. He ultimately tied up and separated the siblings. Kevin described being shot in the head multiple times. Kevin, despite being shot in the head multiple times, was able to escape and find help. But he was too late. Catherine put up such a fight in Rader's attempted strangulation that he stabbed her multiple times in the abdomen. She succumbed to her injuries. Shirley Ruth Vane, strangled March 17, 1977. 3 years later, in 1977, Rader posed as a detective and got inside the Vane family home. Once inside, he forced Shirley's 3 children at gunpoint into a bathroom and locked them inside. He then tied her up and strangled her to death. Rader's latest confession that her telephone rang, causing him to expedite the attack and leaving the children still locked inside the bathroom screaming for their mom. Shirley was only 24 years old, leaving behind her 3 kids and husband, Richard. Nancy Jo Fox, strangled December 8, 1977. On December 8, 1977, Nancy Fox, a single woman who worked 2 jobs and lived alone in a duplex, became BTK Dennis Rader's 7th victim. She was very outgoing, very friendly. Nancy Fox's sister, Beverly Fox, told 2020 she was one to speak her mind. She didn't keep quiet. Rader had been stalking her for about 2 weeks when he eventually broke into her duplex apartment and waited for her. Once she arrived home from her job at a jewelry store, Rader told her that he had an actual issue and that he was going to tie her up and R her. Ultimately, Nancy was strangled. A day after the red run, Rader found a phone booth and reported the red run to Nancy Fox to police. It's almost as if he wanted the world to know there was another BTK Kimber victim. You will find a homicide. Yes, H. Davis, he is now. He wasn't then. At that time, they didn't know it was him. But he was bronzy. I'm telling you, he was bronzy. You will find a homicide, 843 South Pershing. Nancy Fox. Rader was recorded telling the dispatcher he left the phone dangling from the cord. The police replayed the recording of his voice to other victims' family members and even tried to match the voice to other offenders, but they never found a match. Maureen Wallace Hedge, strangled April 27, 1985. That's just a month before I was supposed to graduate high school. That was 40 years ago. By 1985, it had been some time since Rader's last red run. On April 27th of that year, he left in the middle of a Cub Scout meeting complaining of a headache. When driving by Marnie's house, which was just 6 blocks down from Rader's own home, he cut the phone lines and snuck in. Maureen was a 53-year-old widow described as a kind and gentle woman. After waiting in Maureen's bedroom closet until 1 a.m. the following morning, Rader came out of hiding, turned on the bathroom light, and choked her to death. He ultimately took Marnie's body to the church basement in order to pose and photograph her. He then dumped her remains along a dirt road in Park City. That is so heinous. Oh my goodness, this man. Vicki Lynn Wegerle, strangled September 16, 1986. In the fall of 1986, Rader would often hear beautiful piano playing when he'd walk by a house. He became obsessed with the music, and after discovering that Vicki Wegerle, a young mother with a small family, was home alone often, at 10 a.m. on September 16th, Rader dressed up as a telephone repairman with a briefcase and helmet. He walked around the house for a moment before going up to the Wegerle's door. Vicki answered, and Rader said he was doing repairs around the neighborhood, and he asked if he could check her telephone line inside. She let him inside, and after a few minutes of Rader fumbling around with tools to fake a repair, he drew a pistol and forced her into the primary bedroom. After a long and intense struggle, Rader strangled Vicki with a nylon stocking. After she was motionless, he posed for 3 photographs before taking her car keys and using her vehicle as a getaway car. Vicki was found soon after by her husband when he got home. He rushed to the hospital while clinging to life. She rushed to the hospital while clinging to life, but was pronounced unalived after a few hours. Dolores Erlene Johnson Davis, strangled January 19, 1991. Based on what we currently know to be true, by 1991, Rader hadn't unalived anyone in roughly 4 years. Because of this and the fact that some of his previous victims put up a vicious fight to stay alive, Rader targeted an older woman. Rader lived a mile and a half away from Dolores D. Davis, a 16-year-old woman who lived alone. On January 19, 1991, Rader came up with an excuse to slip out of a Boy Scout meeting where he drove to his parents' house to change out of his Scout uniform into his hit clothes. After changing, he drove and parked his car in the Baptist church lot and walked to Davis' house on foot. Once there, under the protection of the darkening evening sky, Rader broke the glass door at the back of the house with the cement block he found in the yard. Once inside, he told Dolores that he was a criminal on the run and needed food and money. He put her in handcuffs and forced her into the bedroom. Ultimately, Rader ransacked Dolores's bedroom looking for trophies to take with him before strangling her with pantyhose. Rader had another nighttime commitment, but didn't want to leave her body in the house, so he put her body in the trunk of her own car, drove it to a lake in Park City, and hid her under some trees. He then drove the car back to her house, wiped it down for fingerprints, retrieved his un, and left to go back to his other commitment. At a later date, he went back to move Dolores's body and left it under a bridge in Sedgwick County, where she was ultimately discovered, still with the pantyhose around her neck, and with the horrifying and infamous BT Killer mask in the dirt next to her body. Rader put the mask on her remains and photographed the scene. Oh my goodness, that's evidence photo right there. Who are the new victims Dennis Rader is accused of killing? Cynthia Dawn Kenning, 16, was born January 17, 1960. At the time of her disappearance, she was a popular junior at her high school. She had made the varsity cheerleading team and was excited for the summer ahead. On June 23, 1976, Cynthia was working at her aunt and uncle's business, the Osage Laundromat, in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, which is only a few hours away from where Rader lived at the time. Investigators believe Rader would have been out that way because the bank across the street from the laundromat was having a new alarm installed at the time, and it's possible he was sent out to install the system through ADT. She was last seen at 9:30 a.m., reportedly getting into a faded beige 1965 Plymouth Belvedere. She left behind her purse, drink, and a half-finished donut. Her family says that her vanishing was completely out of character. And then it says reward. Cindy Kinney was last seen at the Osage Laundry in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, June 23, 1976. Cindy Dawn Kinney, date of birth 1/17/60, 5 foot 1 inch, 100 approximate, brown eyes, brown hair. Contact BT Cook at 918-582 Tulsa, Oklahoma. Contact Orville Barnes AC at Pawhuska, Oklahoma. Contact Bill Mitchell AC at Pawhuska, missing person. Rader has also been named as the prime suspect in the death of 22-year-old Shauna Beth Garber, whose body was found in 1990 but wasn't identified until 2021. While an unidentified victim, she was known as Grace Doe. Shauna had been strangled, and discovered with restraints and bindings. Shauna's body was found in McDonald County, Missouri, despite going missing in Oklahoma. Carrie Rawson, cold case advocate and Dennis Rader's daughter, says, Grace, this is just the beginning. We will get answers for these families. In addition to Cynthia's disappearance and Shauna's red rum, there is another missing woman from Hays, Kansas in 1983, referred to as PJ Prairie, PJ standing for Project. In Rader's journals, a case referred to as, I don't don't know anybody in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm sorry. A case referred as PJ Mossy Lake, the Garber, Missouri, from Garber, Missouri, and an unsolved red rum in Kansas referred to as Project Bell. An unsolved violent crime in Oklahoma known as Oklahoma Case 2 is also being looked at according to the Independent. How did Dennis Rader get linked to these unsolved crimes? Investigators are sharing that Rader's own twisted journal entries may have given out just enough information to connect him to the unsolved disappearances of an Oklahoma teenager and others. In regards to Cynthia's missing person case, it's a laundromat detail with a brunette victim from the same year she went missing that has caught the eye of current investigators, namely lead investigator Osage County Sheriff Eddie Verdon. PJ 17, number 1, Hut 37F 1976. At B of house off 17th had problem getting in, too much noise factor. The brunette was the target. I would watch her nearby laundromat for possible victim. C9. Hit PJ bad wash day. Laundromat were a good place to watch victims and dream sometimes. I have a pair of women underwear on, and after watching a girl or lady retrieving I relieve myself in the bathroom with something terrible that guys do. Laundromat where sick, SIC, is a good place to watch victims and dream, Dennis Rader wrote in 76 journal entry titled PG Bad Wash Day. An expert shared the Osage County Sheriff's Office. The brunette was the target, he added, noting that he was out of town until things cooled down. Rader went to write that he would, after watching women at the establishment. Because of these writings in multiple trophies, a pantyhose ligature chain, and C-clips used for restraint that Osage authorities found in the backyard of the Raiders' former home, detectives are broadening their search for unsolved cases with similar MO and victimology. There were also discoveries that the team has not yet shared publicly, according to officials close to the case. What was Dennis Rader's childhood and young adult life like? Rader grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and while his father, a plant operator at a utility company, was strict, Rader's friends told the New York Times that he was never cruel. Raiders are a little bit stubborn, but not mean. Rader's first cousin, Lee Rader, told the outlet in 2005, as quoted by Oxygen. Dr. Catherine Ramsland, a professor of forensic psychology who corresponded with Rader for more than a decade, described Dennis growing up as an all-American boy, the oldest of 4 boys in his family. He had an intact family and played on his farm. Rader says he spent his childhood playing cops and robbers with other children in the neighborhood, reading comic books, and visiting the local dime store. While recording his favorite memory from his school days, Rader said that he loved recess story time, last days of school, snowball fights, art class, lunch, and an old merry-go-round. It's easy to see how growing up Rader's childhood was no different than many people's experiences. To that end, Dr. Ramsland says things at home between Rader and his mother were far from comfortable. Dr. Ramsland says that in her correspondence with this unaliver, Rader shared that his mother would ignore and humiliate him often, which slowly started to impact his relationship with women in power. Teachers, girls he liked, made him feel completely off balance, and he hated that. So there's a development through his life that of his need to keep women under control, Dr. Ramsland told Oxygen. As a teenager and young adult, Rader acted out ex edishes for voyeurism, auto, uh, yeah, asphyxiation, and cross dressing. He was often caught spying on females' neighbors and wearing the clothes he had stolen, and did that with ropes or other bindings around his arms and neck. As Rader got older, he went to college for a year before dropping out to join the Air Force. Soon after Rader returned to Wichita, he married Paula Dietz, a woman who had gone to the same high school as him. The couple later had 2 children. Who is Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, and what does BTK stand for? As a married adult, the father of 2, Dennis Rader attended Butler County Community College in El Dorado. My dad and mom both went there. You never liked art class? I loved art class. I loved art class. Earning an associate's degree in electronics engineering technology. In 1973, he then enrolled at Wichita State University. Bind, torture, and kill. And graduated in 79 with a Bachelor of Science degree majoring in administration of justice. Rader was a member of Christ Lutheran Church in Wichita and had been elected president of the church council while also being a Cub Scout leader in the area. While working at the Wichita-based office of ADT Security Services, my wrist is itching. From 1974 to 1988, Rader installed security alarms in homes and businesses. When he installed the systems in people's homes, he'd often hear how people were getting the system because they were afraid of the BTK killer in the area. This is how he would leave some of them tied up. That's awful. Little did they know the BTK killer was the individual installing the very system designed to keep him out. Rader would also use his time installing the security system for businesses as scouting opportunities, looking at nearby neighborhoods and following single women. He first used the moniker BTK in communications with the media and authorities during his illing spree in the 1970s. The term BTK stands for bind, torture, ill, which describes his modus operandi. What is Dennis Rader's MO? Dennis Rader's MO, or modus operandi, involved fantasizing about meticulously planning and executing his red rooms. Rader has shared that he's motivated by his exal fantasies, and when his urges to fulfill those fantasies become too strong, that's when he would graduate from thought to action on his projects, or PJs in the writing for short. Because Rader got the most pleasure from stalking a victim, binding them, then torturing them, he had been described as a power control iller. For Rader, it seemed that the illing was the ultimate moment, but it wasn't really what he lived for. What he lived for was the process. Scott Bond, a criminologist, said. Rader would often target women, although some of his victims were men, but they were collateral to get the women. Rader's approach typically involves stalking his victims for some time to watch them and learn their routines for his attack plans. Once he felt comfortable with his plan of approach, Rader would cut the unsuspecting victim's phone line, break into their home, and then surprise them once they arrived. As a means to gain control and fulfill his fantasies, Rader would bind his victims' hands and feet and then proceed to torture and eventually unalive them. Rader used a variety of methods for torture and red rum, including strangulation, suffocation, and poking, all while brandishing a un to induce fear and gain control. When he wasn't illing, Rader would often relieve the ecstasy of the red rum by taking photographs of himself with the victim's clothing in compromising and vulnerable positions. Rader was known for taunting law enforcement and the media with letters, poems, and other communications describing the details of the crimes that only the iller would know. He enjoyed the attention and wanted to establish himself as a notorious serial unaliver. In his letters, he talked about having a factor X, which was part of his personality or psyche that led him to commit these horrible crimes. Who is Carrie Rawson, the daughter of Dennis Rader? Carrie Rosser, a writer, survivor, fighter, and advocate, and Dennis Rader's daughter, is a passionate advocate for victims of use, crime, and trauma. Carrie says she had no idea that her father was even living a double life, one as a family man and another as a sadistic iller. Most of the time, my father was even keeled and kind and warm, his daughter Carrie Rawson told ABC News in 2019. She went on to say that how sometimes he seemed to let his temper flare and that he would become harsh or have flashes of anger that she never anticipated. More recently, Carrie has taken to social media to not only share her deeply insightful story of overcoming the trauma of her serial killer father, but to advocate for unsolved cases. Currently, Carrie is actively working with law enforcement agencies in Kansas to assist in their investigation into cold cases of missing or red-rummed women. Police believe that the father, BTK, is responsible for additional crimes. Carrie said investigators have now zeroed in on the site of a metal shed in the backyard of her childhood home in Park City, Kansas, where it is believed Rader may have hidden trophies stolen from his victims, such as driver's license or items of clothing. Wow. My father was known to hide things in our house, Carrie revealed in a recent interview. He built a false bottom in our hallway where he hid evidence like driver's licenses before. We also had 2 dogs die, and he buried one of them in the background in the 90s. I've always theorized that he might have buried stuff in there too. Carrie made a brave trip to face her dad in prison for the first time in 18 and a half years. She said that Rader is fragile, in a wheelchair, and that his poor eyesight and ailing teeth make her believe that she doesn't know how much time he has left. When she pressed her father for details about his possible connection to more cold cases, she said he brushed her off and came up with an alibi. When he could tell I was there for answers, Carrie said, it was surreal. Response to a Twitter using user asking Carrie if she thinks her father is telling the truth about his lack of involvement in these new cases. She said, "He is what he is, a pathological liar, a narcissist, an actual sadistic psychopath, a 24/7, 365 serial killer, a predator, and a dad. I'm not accusing him of these crimes, and I'm still waiting for evidence," Carrie has insisted, as quoted by the Daily Mail, adding that she is planning on returning to the prison in the coming months for another visit with her father. How was Dennis Rader caught? After a long hiatus, Rader resurfaced in 2004 with a series of communications to local media and authorities, which ultimately led to his arrest in 2005. In one letter to police, Rader asked if his writings on a floppy disk could be traced back to him. In response, the police posted an ad in the Wichita Eagle saying it would be safe for him to send the disk. On February 16, 2005, once the purple 1.44 megabyte Memorex floppy disk was in the hands of the police, detectives uncovered a detailed file containing the words Christ Lutheran Church. Even more damning, the file was last modified by Dennis. Armed with that information, they learned of a Dennis Rader, who was president of the church's council. This led them to more evidence that gave them enough to obtain a warrant to test a pap smear taken from Carrie while at the Kansas State University Medical Clinic. Genetic genealogy testing showed a familial match between the pap smear and the perpetrator's DNA found under victim Vicki Lynn Wegerle's fingernails. On the afternoon of February 25, 2005, 9 days after mailing the floppy disk, Dennis Rader was arrested. An arresting officer asked, "Mr. Rader, do you know why you're going downtown?" Rader replied, "Oh, I have my suspicions why." What happened after Rader's arrest? You was a Cub Scout? My son was in Cub Scouts for one meeting. My husband was going to be his Cub Scout leader, and it was so expensive to get his uniform and all the stuff he would need, and I got all that. And then after my husband and CJ went to one Cub Scout meeting, my husband went back to work over the road as a truck driver, and he couldn't make the meetings anymore. So he asked me to be the Cub Scout leader, and I said, "I'm not going to be no Cub Scout leader. There ain't no way. I don't know anything about Cub Scouts. I was a Brownie, and I was a Girl Scout, and that was enough for me." What happened after Rader's arrest? After Rader was arrested, his home vehicle, the church he attended, his office at City Hall, and the main branch of the Park City Library were all searched. Investigators initially found computer equipment and a pair of black pantyhose in the backyard shed. They would later find the driver's license of other victims and photographs of Rader dressed up like the victims, typically posed in provocative manner. At a press conference the next morning, Wichita Police Chief Norman Williams announced, "The bottom line, BTK is arrested." Once booked, Rader was charged with 10 counts of first-degree redrum. He originally did not speak at his May 2005 arraignment, so the judge entered a not guilty plea. Pleas on his behalf. A month later, Rader changed his plea to guilty. He described the red rooms in detail and made no apologies. Did Rader confess to the red rooms? Dennis Rader did confess to the 10 known red rooms. On June 27, 2005, Rader gave a dramatic television confession in which he described illing the 10 victims. Below is a complete, unabridged version of his 46-minute confession streaming on KWCH 12 CBS. Okay.
All right, Mr. Rader, I need to find out more information. On that particular day, the 15th day of January, 1974, can you tell me where you went to kill Mr. Joseph Otero?
I think it's 1834, Edgemore.
All right. Can you tell me approximately what time of day you went there?
Somewhere between 7 and 7:30.
This particular location, did you know these people?
No, that's no, that was part of my, I guess my what you call fantasy. These people were selected.
All right. So you
Okay.
you were engaged in some kind of fantasy during this period of time?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, when you use the term fantasy, is this something you were doing for your personal pleasure?
Sexual fantasy, sir.
I see. So you went to this residence, and what occurred then?
Well, I had did some thinking on what I was going to do to either Mrs. Otero or Josephine, and basically broke into the house, or didn't break into the house, but when they came out of the house, I came in and confronted the family, and then we went from there.
All right. Had you planned this beforehand?
To some degree, yes. After I got in the house, I lost control of it, but it was, you know, in the back of my mind, I had some ideas what I was going to do, but I basically panicked that first day. So
Beforehand, did you know who was there in the house?
I thought Mrs. Otero and the two kids, the two younger kids, were in the house. I didn't realize Mr. Otero was going to be there.
All right. How did you get into the house, Mr. Wade?
I came through the back door, cut the phone lines, waited at the back door, had reservations about even going or just walking away, but pretty soon the door opened and I was in.
All right. So the door opened. Was it open for you, or did somebody?
I think one of the kids, I think the junior, or not junior, yes, the young girl, Joseph, opened the door. He probably let the dog out because the dog was in the house at that time.
All right. When you went into the house, what happened then?
Well, I confronted the family, pulled a pistol, confronted Mr. Otero, and asked him to, you know, that I was there to basically, I was wanted to get the car. I was hungry, food. I was wanted, and asked him to lie down in the living room. And at that time, I realized that wouldn't be a really good idea. So I finally, the dog was a real problem. So I asked Mr. Otero if he could get the dog out. So he had one of the kids put it out. And then I took him back to the bedroom.
You took who back to the bedroom?
The family.
Okay,
The 4 members.
I got you.
All right. What happened then?
At that time, I tied him up.
While still holding him at gunpoint?
Well, in between tying and yes. Yeah.
All right. After you tied them up, what occurred?
Well, they started complaining about being tied up, and I re-loosened the bonds a couple of times. Tried to make Mr. Otero as comfortable as I could. Currently had a cracked rib from a car accident, so I had him put a pillow down for his head. Had he put a, I think he's Parker or a coat underneath him. They talked to me about, giving the car and whatever money. I guess they didn't have very much money. And there I realized that, I didn't have a mask on or anything. They already could ID me, and made a decision to go ahead and put him down, I guess, or strangle him.
All right. What did you do to Joseph Otero?
Joseph Otero?
Yeah,
Okay.
Joseph Otero Sr., Mr. Otero, the father.
I put a plastic bag over his head and then some cords and tightened it.
And this was in the bedroom.
Yes, sir.
Did he, in fact, suffocate and die as a result of this?
Not right away. No, sir, he didn't.
What happened?
Well, after that, I did Mrs. Otero. I had never strangled anyone before, so I really didn't.
Okay, well, we get the gist of this here. I don't want to sit and listen to 45 minutes of him describing all these gruesome details. So I am going to cut that off. So this is his. Why did Dennis Rader have so much time between red rooms? Despite his illing 10 people over the course of 20 years, 2 decades, Rader often went years between red rooms. This long cooling off period is sometimes the Bond says it is that Bond says is very atypical. Most serial killers go a few months or years between taking the lives of someone, mainly because for them it satisfies a particular urge that can only be dissipated after the thought is carried out. These urges have been compared to the likeliness of people suffering with substance use disorders. Some offenders have been known to have longer cooling off periods because major life changes like getting married, having children, or moving to a new location. Others sometimes have an increased fear of capture if law enforcement agencies publicly intensify their efforts to solve crimes. The increased fear can also be a result of slipping up and leaving evidence at a previous crime scene. So the offender will slow their pace to gain more control. Dr. Ramsland theories that Rader was always looking for the next victim, but that his life demands as a father, husband, and employee would grow. So his ability to come up with these excuses to go out and perpetrate crimes became jeopardized. It's not like he was inactive during those periods of times. It's that he didn't have all the right circumstances to go forward with something. She said, now there's unearthed evidence that may prove Rader wasn't inactive during those periods at all. They're using a metal detector under what looks like used to be a sidewalk. Investigators digging in Dennis Rader's old backyard looking for evidence. Rader provided Dr. Ramsland with a list of 55 projects or potential victims he had once targeted. That included specific details about the targets and what he'd like to do if he had the time. She said that his fascination with cutting out magazine pictures of unclothed women, drawing graphic or violent images, and dressing up like the victims and strangling himself enabled him to delay his illings. Rader stated that in his police interview, that there are a lot of lucky people, meaning that he had thought about and developed various levels of red run plans for other victims. The active fantasy life is something that allowed him to relive his crimes between ills. And it's a behavior expert have seen in other offenders. If you're looking to read anything about BTK, we suggest first reading Carrie Rawson's book, A Serial Killer's Daughter, My Story of Faith, Love, and Overcoming. A character based on Rader, played by actor Sonny Valicenti, appears in the Netflix series Mindhunter. An antagonist from the movie The Cloverleaf Killer was inspired by Dennis Rader. Kane Hodder portrays Rader in the 2008 movie BTK, a half biotic and half fictionalized account of the Red Rooms. Documentaries BTK Killer, The Decades-Long Hunt for the Monster, and BTK Catching One of the Most Infamous Serial Killers. A&E's BTK Confessions of a Serial Killer. This is what he looked like. It's not, he looks much weaker now than he did then, according to my husband. Okay, and that's the end of that one. Okay, and this is a forensic case file, Catching the BTK Strangler. Okay, we already read about this on the other page because he called and asked him about the sending the floppy disk over to the, how old was he? Let's see, he's 78 now. And that was 30 years ago. I guess in his late 20s, early 30s when all this was happening. Okay, this talks about circumstantial evidence wasn't enough, so investigators obtained a warrant to test the DNA of a close relative, Rader's daughter, who'd had a pap smear done in Kansas State University Medical Clinic. DNA tests done at the lab in Topeka revealed a familiar match to the DNA under one of BTK's victims' fingernails. The victim, who had not been previously linked to BTK until his letter to the Wichita Eagle. The chain of evidence was clear. Dennis Rader was BTK. He was arrested on February 25th, 2005, over 30 years after the investigation had begun. In his interrogation, Rader said he was confessing to all 10 red rooms and committed the floppy did me in. How contemporary digital forensics catch criminals. Digital forensics has come a long way since BTK's case. A criminal's fingerprints and DNA are only on physical objects anymore. They're on data and metadata too. Every email, every photo, every evidence, every device connected to a network is now a possible smoking gun. The investigators working BTK's case used every drop of possible evidence they could find. Today's investigators couldn't possibly have do the same. In a recent R case in the UK, the prime subject's chat logs contained over 70,000 WhatsApp messages, any one of which could have been enormously relevant. The digital forensics team in charge of these cases estimated it would have taken a single investigator 90 days of working 9 to 5 before combing through them all. Today's digital forensic investigators have to work smarter, not just harder. Artificial intelligence can play a role in preliminary sortings through massive swaths of seized data. Technological understanding of different devices, programming languages, and local shortcuts are paramount. Further knowledge in legal proceedings is crucial for maintaining a chain of evidence that maintains a court-approved integrity. All this requires digital forensic investigators to have a type of forensic education that would have been unheard of in the time of BTK. And this talks about the 3, and you can visit the sites. So this also goes on to talk about Rhode Island and their forensics and other people's forensic investigations. Okay. Now I'm going to pull this up. I think I forgot to put that last one on the screen. I'm so sorry about that. Wonder why it's not letting me in. My computer's acting stupid. All right, there we go. Dennis Rader, born March 9th, 1945, 1 month and 2 days before my mother. So, yeah, 78's right. Is an American serial killer who red-rummed 10 people over the span of 3 decades before his arrest and confession in 2005. He called himself BTK because he bound, tortured, and killed his victims. I don't know what this is. This is him standing in court during his sentencing. He was raised in Wichita and later claimed that as a youth he had killed animals and developed violent sexual fantasies that involved bondage. In the 1960s, he served in the U.S. Air Force, and in 70, he returned to Wichita, where he married and had 2 children. He held various jobs, including a brief stint as a factory worker for the Coleman Company, making camping equipment. He worked with my grandfather at the time, but my grandfather didn't know that he was working with the BTK. In 1979, he graduated from Wichita State University, where he studied criminal justice. That sounds like Brian Kohberger. He was studying criminal justice. During this time, he began working for ADT, a home security company, and in 1991, he became a compliance officer in Park City, Kansas. Rader was active in his church and served as a Boy Scout leader. On January 15, 1974, Rader committed his first red runs, strangling a family of 4, including 2 children, in their Wichita home. The mother had worked for Coleman. Semen was found at the scene, though none of the victims had been sexually assaulted. Rader took a watch from the home, and he could acquire souvenirs of often underwear from subsequent victims. In April 1974, Rader targeted a 21-year-old woman who was another Coleman employee. After breaking into her house, however, he also encountered her brother, who managed to escape despite being shot. Rader fatally stabbed the woman before fleeing. Later that year, he wrote a letter detailing the January red rums and saying the code word for me will be find them, torture them, kill them, BTK. He left the note in a book at Wichita Public Library, and it was eventually recovered by the police. Now, I don't know how the police would have known unless somebody checked out that book and took it back and told the librarian, and then the librarian called the police. Over the next 2 decades, Rader killed 5 more women. His 6th victim was strangled in March of 77 after he locked her 3 young children in the bathroom. Following the unaliving of his next victim in December 77, Rader grew irritated by the lack of media coverage. In a letter to a local TV station, he wrote, "How many people do I have to unalive before I get a name in the paper or some national attention?" The resulting coverage helped set off a panic. Rader then waited 8 years before red rumming a neighbor in her home in 1985. He reportedly later took her body to his church, where he photographed her in bondage. A 28-year-old mother of 2 was unalived in 86, and in 91, Rader committed his last red rum, strangling a 62-year-old woman in her secluded home. The cases subsequently went cold. In 2004, on 30th anniversary of Rader's first red rums, a local paper ran a feature in which it speculated that the killer either passed away or had been imprisoned. Rader responded by sending various evidence from his 9th red rum, notably a copy of the victim's driver's license as well as photographs of her body, to a reporter. For the next year, he sent packages to media or simply left items around Wichita. He often used cereal boxes, possibly a reference to serial unaliver. To hold drawings, crime souvenirs, including photographs, written descriptions of the red rums, and even dolls posed to mimic the various unalivings. In January 2005, police received a break-in after recovering a cereal box that included a note in which Rader asked police whether they would be able to trace a floppy disk he wanted to send them. Though through a classified ad, law enforcement officials indicated that it would be safe. He then sent them a disk, which the police quickly traced to his church, where he served as president of the congregation. Rader's DNA was then matched to the semen found at the first crime scene. He was arrested February 2005, and he soon confessed to the crimes and expressed shock that the police had lied to him. In June, Rader pled guilty to 2 months, and 2 months later, he was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms. Okay, this is Wichita. Okay, this is just all the same information where he taunted the police and was captured and arrested, and a trial sentence and sentencing. On August 18, 2005, Dennis Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms in prison with no possibility of parole for 175 years. He is currently incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. Okay. The grisly story of Dennis Rader, the man no one suspected was the BTK killer. For 30 years, Boy Scout troop leader and church council president Dennis Rader was secretly the BTK killer, while looking like the perfect family man to his neighbors in Kansas. This is him in his orange jumpsuit. I'm sorry. I think I read really slow. Between his first red rum in 74 and his capture in 2005, BTK Dennis Rader hid in plain sight as a church-going family man in Park City, Kansas. And it says he's the president of his church congregation, as well as loving husband and doting father. Altogether, he seemed to be a reliable and responsible man to all who knew him, but he was leading a double life. Though not even Rader's wife, Paula Dietz, had any idea had secretly been leading another life, as in Park City, Kansas serial killer, better known as the BTK killer, a man who had tortured and red-rummed 10 people in and around Wichita, Kansas between 74 and 91. I lived in El Dorado between 71 and 86. And I grew up around this story. This story was on the news like very often. When the BTK killer, which stands for bind, torture, ill, was finally caught in 2005, Dennis Rader's wife and his daughter Carrie even refused to believe it. My dad was the one who taught me my morals, his daughter would later say. He taught me right from wrong. She had no idea that for 30 years her father preyed on girls just like her. This is the chilling story of the BTK killer. Dennis Rader, the BTA killer, in court in Wichita on August 17, 2005. Before Dennis became the BTK killer, Dennis Lynn Rader was born March 9, 1945, as the oldest of 4 in Pittsburgh, Kansas. He would grow up in a fairly humble home in Wichita, the same city which he would later terrorize. Even as a teen, Rader had a violent streak in him. He would allegedly hang and torture stray animals, and as he later explained in 2005 interview, when I was in grade school, I sort of had some problems. Actual fantasies, probably more than normal. All males probably go through some kind of actual fantasy. Mine was just probably a bit weirder than other people's. Dennis Rader went on to describe how he would bind his hands and ankles with rope. He would also cover his head with a bag, actions he would later employ on his victims. He cut out photos of women from magazines whom he found arousing and drew ropes and gags on them. He imagined how he would restrain and control them, which he later would bring to his crimes as the BTK killer. But Rader continued to maintain an orderly outward appearance, and he attended college for a time before he dropped out and joined the U.S. Air Force. Okay, this goes to talk about while his wife Paula was sleeping, Dennis Rader broke into the home of the Order family and rubbed on every person inside the house. The 2 children, 11-year-old Josie and 9-year-old Joseph, were found forced to watch while he strangled their parents to unalive. Josie cried out, "Mommy, I love you," while she was watching Rader strangle her mother to to unalived. Then the little girl was dragged down into the basement where Rader pulled off her underwear and hung her from a sewer pipe. Her last words were to ask what would become of her. Her iller, stoic and calm, told her, "Well, honey, you're going to be in heaven tonight with the rest of your family." He watched the girl choke to death, relieving himself while she passed away. He took pictures of the unalived bodies and gathered up some of the little girl's underwear as a memento of his first massacre. Then Dennis Rader went home to his wife. He had to get ready for church as he was, after all, church council president. The home of Paula Dietz and Dennis Rader. It looks like a normal average home. It says private property right there. While her husband massacred a family, Dennis Rader's wife Paula prepared to start one of her own. Rader, yes, it does. Rader took his next two victims just a few months after the Ortero's 15-year-old son discovered his family. The BTK killer stalked and waited in the apartment of a young college student named Catherine Bright before he stabbed her, strangled her, and then shot her brother Kevin twice. Though he survived, Kevin later described Rader as having psychotic eyes. Paula was 3 months pregnant with Rader's first child when, unknown to her, her husband began to advertise his crimes covertly. After describing how he killed the Orteros in a letter he stashed inside an engineering book at the Wichita Public Writer, Dennis Rader called a local paper, the Wichita Eagle, and let them know where they could find his confession. Okay, now we know how the police got a hold of the confession. It wasn't just somebody had checked out the book. The Wichita Eagle is our local newspaper. A lot of people only got the Sunday paper. He added that he intended to ill again and named himself BTK, which was an acronym for his preferred method, Brian Torture Ill. He looked mad. He does kind of have psychotic eyes, doesn't he? Okay. This latest, only a few short years though, and the BTK iller struck again in 1977, but shortly before her husband AR'd and choked his seventh victim, Shirley Vane, to death while her 6-year-old son watched through the keyhole of a door. Dietz found an early draft of a poem entitled Shirley's Locks, in which her husband writes, "Thou shalt not scream, but lay on cushion and think of me and pass away." But Paula Dietz did not ask questions, even when the clues added up. She didn't say anything when her husband marked up newspaper stories on the serial killer with what he called his own secret code. When she noticed that the taunting letters the BTK killer sent to police were full of some horrendous misspellings, as the letters she got from her husband, she didn't say anything more than a gentle ribbing, "You spell just like BTK." This is the showing one of the masks. Nor did she ask him about the mysterious sealed box he kept in their home. She never even once tried to look inside. That woman was naive as naive can come, I'm telling you. If she had, she would have found a treasure chest of horrors, which Rader referred as the mother lode. It contained mementos from the BTK killer's crime scenes, dead women's underwear, driver's license, along with pictures of him dressed up in the victim's underwear, choking himself and burying himself alive, reenacting the ways he had killed them. Part of my MO was to find and keep the victim's underwear, Rader explained in an interview. Then in my fantasy, I would relive the day or start a new fantasy. Nonetheless, his wife would later insist to the police that Dennis Rader was a good man, a great father. He would never hurt anyone. The BT killer, a proud father, secretly living a double life. That's him with his two kids, I'm supposing. Not even Dennis Rader's own children suspected him. Their father was at his worst a strictly moral Christian. His daughter Carrie Rawson would recall how once her father did angrily grab her brother by the neck and she had her mother to pull him off to save the boy's life. I can still picture it clearly, and I can see the intense anger in my dad's face and eyes, Carrie reported. But this instance appeared isolated. When she learned of the BTK killer, it was her own father, ironically, who soothed her late night worries. Her father waved every morning to 53-year-old Maureen Hedge while on his way to church. When she became the BTK killer's eighth victim, tied up and choked to passing, it was Dennis Rader himself who had been the one to comfort and reassure his family. Don't worry, he told them, we're safe. In truth, Rader had red-rummed a woman the night before after sneaking out of a campsite he was chaperoning on his son's Cub Scout retreat. He returned by morning to the group of young boys with no suspicion. In 1986, he unalived his ninth victim, 20-year-old Vicki Wegerle, while her 2-year-old watched from a playpen. Her red rum would remain unsolved until the BTK killer unknowingly brought himself to justice. Dennis Rader faces justice after 3 decades. And this goes on to tell his story. And we already read that in other pages. Where is Dennis Rader now? Sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, Dennis Rader is currently incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. That is just off of 254 highway out east of El Dorado, about 3 miles. It's a big facility. He is serving 10 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole, ensuring he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Rader is reportedly held on solitary confinement, permitted only 1 hour outside his cell, 5 days a week for exercise and showers. While he is barred from appearing on television or speaking to reporters, he is allowed to send and receive letters. His daughter, Carrie Rawson, disclosed that Rader may have suffered a stroke in 2018, which could have resulted in short-term memory loss and dementia. Latest update. January 2019, Carrie Rawson, Dennis Rader's daughter, published a book. July 21, 23, Rader wrote a letter to Fox News. August 25, 23, became the suspect in new cold cases. August 25, 23, investigators looking for new evidence in Rader's former home. March 2024, excluded as a suspect of the passing of Shauna Beth Garber. January 2019, Carrie Rawson, Dennis Rader's daughter, published a book. Carrie Rawson, Dennis Rader's daughter, published a book in late 2019 titled A Serial Killer's Daughter, My Story of Faith, Love, and Overcoming. In July 21, 23, Rader wrote a letter to Fox News Digital. Rader has taken an interest in high-profile criminal cases, including the Gilgo Beach murders, on Long Island, New York, following the July 2023 arrest of Rex Heuermann, who has been charged with the killings of 7 women. Rader wrote a letter to Fox News Digital describing Heuermann as a clone of himself, drawing parallels to his own arrest in 2005. Rader emphasizes how advancement in technology and DNA evidence were instrumental in helping police identify suspects in such cases. August 25th, 23, became a suspect in the disappearance of Cynthia Dawn Kinney and the red rum of Shauna Beth Garber. So he was relieved from he was excluded as a suspect from her. So that means he's no longer a suspect. And then down here, he becomes a suspect again. In recent years, Rader has been named a suspect in additional cold cases, including the 76th disappearance of Cynthia Dawn Kinney. Investigators were also able to link Rader to the red rum of 22-year-old Shauna Beth Garber in McDonald County, Missouri. Garber, whose remains were not identified until 2021, was found unalived in December of 1990. She had been hard, strangled, and restrained. August 25, 2023, investigators looking for new evidence in Rader's former home. New items of interest were recovered from his former home, potentially connecting him to a more unsolved crimes. His daughter, Carrie Rawson, had cooperated with law enforcement, using her childhood memories to help identify possible crime sites linked to her father. In March of 2024, excluded as suspect of death of Shauna Beth Garber. Okay, so he's excluded again. Investigators have formally excluded Dennis Rader as a potential suspect in Shauna Beth Garber's cold case. She was found unalived in December 1990, having been hard, strangled, and restrained. And then this goes on to talk about his victims and the capture of him, and we already know about that. And Rader was ultimately sentenced 10 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. So we know all of that. And then here is a video from August 2023. Pull that up on screen. Now this is from I Know Her. BTK Iller, Dennis Rader, is in a wheelchair and rotting to his core in prison, his daughter says. Let's listen. It's only 48 seconds long.
I mean, I hadn't seen him in 18 years. He hadn't seen me. We had been cut off for 2 years. It had been letters all that time before that. So it took him a minute to process who I was. He's lost like 7 inches and he's in a wheelchair. He's pretty much rotting like to his core.
After 18 years of not seeing him in person, lost 7 inches. Harry lost if he was responsible. At which point she said he dropped the first time. So that's what that said.
In this photo, Dennis poses with his daughter in a seemingly ordinary and calm scene. Dennis Rader, known as BTK, terrorized Kansas by killing 10 people between 1974 and 1991. Despite his crimes, he led an apparently normal family life. His daughter stated that she had a loving and typical relationship with him, never suspecting his double life.
How does a family man, church leader, and Boy Scout volunteer hide a chilling secret? Meet Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, one of history's most infamous double lives. For over 30 years, Rader terrorized Wichita as the BTK killer, murdering 10 people while maintaining the facade of a loving father and community leader. His calculated crimes and taunting letters kept police guessing until his shocking arrest in 2005. How did he keep his dark side hidden for decades? Subscribe to uncover more chilling stories like this on our channel.
The Kansas comeback starts now. Lower home prices, better job opportunities, and excellent education.
I mean, I hadn't seen him in 18 years.
Okay, that's all of the videos. So here's a Dennis Rader interview.
Rare glimpse inside the mind of a serial murderer. The BTK killer terrorized Wichita, Kansas for 3 decades. Now in a jail, you'll hear directly from him how and why he committed these gruesome crimes. Here's Dateline NBC's Edie Magnus.
BTK seemed uncatchable. Everyone wondered who he was, where he was, until just a few months ago, when a most unlikely man who'd lived among them all along, Dennis Rader, was arrested.
I am BTK. Yeah, I'm the guy they're after, 100%.
This interview, obtained by Dateline after it was done, was conducted by a Harvard-trained forensic psychologist, Robert Mendoza, who performs more than 100 evaluations for criminal and civil cases each year. He was hired by the defense team to assess Rader's sanity.
I got this fantasy. I started working out this fantasy in my mind. And once that person become a fantasy, I could just loop it over. I could lay in bed at night thinking about this person, the events and how it's going to happen. And it became a real, almost like a picture show. You know, I wanted to go ahead and produce it, direct it, and go through with it, no matter what the costs were, the consequences. It was going to happen one way or another.
No one knows for sure why Rader had to kill to fulfill those fantasies. In this interview with the psychologist, Rader dismisses each victim as a project. He says he'd begin by stalking.
He's still
Stalking
alive.
stage is when you start learning more about your victims.
He's still alive. My husband worked at the
went to the
prison
library. I looked up
3
their
years
names,
ago and had
address, cross-reference, and called them a couple of times. Drove by there whenever I could.
And each time he struck, Rader said he was armed with what he calls his hit kit.
Already made up.
It contained what?
Plastic bags, rope, tape, knife, gun. All those wouldn't be in the kit. They'd be where I could have them in the house and gather them up.
Tools that would come to define the work of BTK. The victims were often discovered bound with tape or rope tied in unusual knots. In his jailhouse interview, Rader blamed his murder spree on that mysterious force he has always claimed was way beyond his control, Factor X.
Something that's, I use it, I actually think I'm maybe possessed with demons. I was dropping on my head when I was a kid. I've talked to some theological Christian people, and some of those people are really strong. They actually think, well, the Bible.
He just said I was dropped on my head as a kid. Listen.
With demons. I was dropped on my head when I was a kid. I've talked to some theological Christian people, and some of those people are really strong. They actually think, well, the Bible says that there's demons within you or can come into you. That's the only thing I can figure out. I have, something drove me to do this. The normal people just don't do this. You can't stop it. I can't stop it. It's just, it controls me. You know, it's like,
Well, it's stopped now because he can't do that sitting in solitary confinement with a guard outside his door 24/7.
it's in the driver's seat.
10 innocent people murdered to satisfy the twisted needs of one selfish man.
And you can see much more of this chilling interview tonight on Dateline at 8/7.
So,
Yes. I'm leaving corporate. No, you're not. I'm leaving my prison.
Ted Bundy. So that's totally something different. But yeah, so the BTK killer is still in, he did his work in Wichita and Oklahoma and Missouri. Now that's Wichita, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Okay, so then no. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Anyway, but he's now living out his life in El Dorado, or 3 miles outside of El Dorado. And I'm very thankful that my husband is no longer working as a guard at that prison because it was scary. They had to wear stab vests from the moment they walked in the door, before they even got in the door, which were Kevlar vests over their uniform, and the air conditioning only worked to lower the temperature from 110 degrees inside the prison to about 90 degrees. And my husband would get out of the truck at work, and it was like a 15-minute walk to get into the prison. And he said that by the time he went from the truck to inside the prison, he was sweating and his full uniform was wet. And he said he had to stay that way all night long. Some nights he would walk the catwalk around the top to where they could look down into all the cells to make sure everything was right. Sometimes he had to walk where he could look into the cells right in front of their doors. And sometimes he worked one level and sometimes he worked another level. And sometimes they put him over in D block, which is where BTK is. And he would just sit with BTK all night and sit outside his room and sweat. So I could always tell the nights he did that because he kept his phone with him and he would send me TikToks all night long. There was no sleeping when he was working there sitting outside BTK's door. But I thought that was a fascinating story, and because it did just recently come up on News Nation again, where the daughter had gone and visited him. So I kind of brought it up to date from clear back in the 70s. Like I said, I grew up hearing about him, and with my dad being a police officer, he was always on the lookout. He was afraid that something would happen to our families. So, yeah, it was something growing up listening about the BTK killer, and then finding out that my grandpa worked at the same place he worked at. So my grandpa knew him. My grandpa's not alive anymore, but my grandpa knew him. And my best friend used to work intake at that prison. She wasn't there when he was she there when he was brought in? No, because she worked there in 2019. So he was already there when she worked there. But it's close to home. Too close for comfort, I'll tell you. I miss my grandpa too. I had 3 sets of grandparents. My mom and dad were married from before I was born until they died. But my older brother had grandparents that lived in Wichita. His biological father lived in Wichita. And we would go over there like every weekend and visit my brother's grandpa and grandma. And when I was about 8 years old, I looked at my grandpa and I said, "Can I call you grandpa too?" And he said, "Button nose, you can call me anything you want." So that's when he became my grandpa. I can remember when I was about 11, my grandpa always grew tomatoes and peppers and things in the garden that he could keep for the winter to have good vegetables and stuff. And we were sitting outside. He always carried a Tupperware salt shaker in the bib of his overalls. And I asked him one day, I said, "Why do you have a salt shaker?" He said, "Come on, let me show you." And we went out in the garden and we picked tomatoes, take a bite of the tomatoes and put salt on the tomato and continue eating it with salt on it. And my mom yelled out the kitchen window, "Nancy, you have to wash them first." I said, Grandpa, don't. She said, "If Grandpa don't do it, I don't have to do it." So that's one of my favorite memories. Then before I could get my driver's license, my grandpa made me tear down and rebuild a Holly double pumper carburetor, 4-barrel carburetor. So I didn't learn to take it out of the car or put it back in the car. I just had to rebuild it. He said, because at that time, he said, if anything happens to your car and it breaks down, he says 9 times out of 10, you're going to have carburetor troubles. And you need to know how to take care of your carburetor. Well, now vehicles don't have carburetors. But I learned a lot from my grandpa. And so I can even remember their phone number. It was 316-838-1234. And I remember anytime I get mad at my mama, I could call my grandpa. You see these pictures of little kids calling, "Dad, you need to come take care of this woman. She's acting crazy." So, yeah, that was me calling my grandpa. So, anyway, I just wanted to bring up a cold case, and because it's coming back into the story of him coming back into the news. So I am going to get off of here. My son has already gone to work, and hopefully he didn't put all the spaghetti away because I didn't eat supper before I came on my live. All right. Thank you for being here. Do something nice for us. Oh, I won't be here tomorrow because I have to go to the doctor at 11:30 to see if I broke something right in here on my arm back in August when I fell. I have to go to the doctor and get her to prescribe me referring to get x-rays on my shoulder and my upper arm. And then after that appointment, I have to go to Hutchinson and take care of Henry. And when I'm in Hutchinson, I can't do a live. So I won't be here tomorrow, but I will be back Thursday. So do something nice for someone, even if it's be the reason they smile today, and search for crime. Thank you.